An alien warrior saved by a human-like creature teams up to stop enemies and protect an artifact that controls space and time. The shadows seem to linger in the air, like an ominous, ever-present fog, suffocating the very essence of the planet beneath Celine's boots. She had landed on Arendor with a single goal in mind: find the ancient artifact said to hold unimaginable power. The planet was desolate yet alive, with a strange, almost unnatural energy. And now, as she ventured deeper into its dark forests, the very air seemed to hum with something darker, something waiting. The first attack came without warning. One moment Celine was surveying the dense forest ahead, her eyes narrowing as she tried to decipher the ancient symbols carved into the trees. The next she was thrown to the ground by a force as she couldn't see, a deep guttural screech echoing through the trees. She scrambled to her feet, drawing her weapon with practiced ease. But there was nothing in front of her, nothing to strike. Just the shadows creeping, moving, swarming. The shadows, she muttered under her breath, remembering the warnings of her commanders back on Draxus. The creatures were nothing more than myths, beings of pure darkness that could not be touched, not seen, not fought. And yet here they were attacking her with relentless fury. She fired into the blackness, her shots dissipating in midair, absorbed by the ever-present void. Her heart pounded. There was no escape, no ground to stand on. The creatures were everywhere and nowhere all at once. Suddenly, a sharp metallic noise broke the silence, a streak of light in the dark sky. A figure materialized out of the shadows, moving with a fluid grace that Celine couldn't match. She barely had time to react before the figure lunged, slashing through the air, with what seemed like an impossible force carving through the shadows with the precision of a predator. The air shimmered as the figure moved, light bending around them, leaving a trail of faint energy in their wake. Celine's pulse raced as she watched the figure cut through the darkness like a knife through silk. She raised her weapon, preparing to fire, when the figure turned to her, the glow of energy reflecting in their eyes. It was a man, tall and imposing, with features she couldn't quite make out in the gloom. His movements were sharp, purposeful, like someone who had danced with death more times than he could count. "Do you need help?" the man called to her, his voice calm as though they were not standing in the midst of a deadly battle. "Who are you?" Celine demanded, her grip tightening on her gun. Her instincts screamed at her to trust no one, not even this mysterious stranger. "Someone trying to survive," the man replied. His tone was strangely disarming, yet there was something distant in it, as if he had seen the worst the universe had to offer and learned not to care. "The shadows are relentless. And you?" He gestured toward her with a quick flick of his hand. "You're out of your depth." "You don't know me." Celine shot back, eyes narrowing. She didn't need help. She could handle herself. She'd been trained for situations like this, but she had never encountered something like this. "What do you want?" The man paused, as if considering her question for a moment. The flickering light around him seemed to pulse as he stood still, holding back the shadows with a single gesture. "I'm looking for the same thing you are," he said, his voice steady. "The artifact." Celine stiffened, her guard going up immediately. "The artifact?" she echoed, her mind racing. How could he know that? How could anyone know, not the first to come looking for it? He continued, seemingly unfazed by her suspicion. "But I've learned a few things. The shadows, they guard it, and they won't stop until they've killed everyone who dares to come close." His words chilled her more than any weapon ever could. Her mission, her survival, everything hinged on finding that artifact. If these creatures were truly guarding it, then things were far worse than her commanders had ever let on. "How do you know this?" Celine asked, lowering her weapon slightly, though she didn't fully trust him. "And why should I believe you?" "Why not?" the man replied with a smile, though it didn't reach his eyes. "I'm still alive, aren't I?" The shadows seemed to converge again, screeching louder this time. Celine could feel their presence like fingers brushing the back of her neck, but there was no way to fight them. Not with her weapons, not with her training. She needed a way to survive. Maybe, just maybe, this man could help. "If we're both after the same thing," she said cautiously, "then I suggest we stop wasting time talking." She gestured to the encroaching darkness. "I've never seen anything like these things. You must know something." "Acham." The man glanced at her, his expression unreadable, then nodded. "Fine. Follow me. But stay close." The shadows like to prey on the isolated. Celine's instincts screamed at her to stay alert, but she had no choice. She couldn't do this alone. They moved quickly, the man leading with an ease that suggested he had done this 100 times before. They fought their way through the forest, the shadows swarming and recoiling as the man cut through them with calculated precision. Every move he made seemed designed to confuse and mislead, luring the shadows into traps that she couldn't even see. It was as if he could predict their every move. "Where's your team?" the man asked as they paused for a moment, catching their breath in a small clearing. "My team's gone," Celine said quietly. She'd lost contact with them hours ago, and now the harsh reality of her situation was settling in. Alone on a hostile planet with no backup, no support. Just this mysterious stranger at her side. She didn't know what he wanted, but she wasn't going to waste time questioning him further. "Not now. It's just me now." The man's gaze softened for the briefest of moments before he turned back to the path ahead. "It's always just you, isn't it?" The words stung more than she cared to admit. She didn't have the time to dwell on them. The shadows were relentless, and they were getting closer. "Let's just focus on surviving," she said. "After we get the artifact, you can explain yourself." A faint smirk tugged at the corner of his lips, but it was gone before she could catch it. "Deal." For the first time since the attack, Celine felt the faintest flicker of hope. She was far from safe, but at least for now she wasn't alone. The road ahead was uncertain, and the artifact they were searching for could very well be their doom. But as they fought their way through the endless darkness together, she realized something she hadn't considered. Before, this was no longer just about survival. This was about trust, however fleeting, and perhaps, just perhaps, the beginning of something more. Celine began to notice that Alaron was becoming stronger and more unusual after each battle with the shadows. His physical strength, his combat skill, his endurance, it all seemed to escalate, pushing the limits of what was possible. But something else was happening as well. He was not only skilled in combat, but also gradually began losing normal human behaviors and emotions. His responses were becoming less like that of a man and more like something otherworldly. He no longer seemed to care for the things that once motivated him: self-preservation, companionship, survival. All those seemed to vanish in the chaos of the fight, as though his humanity was slowly slipping away with each passing day. One night, Alaron revealed a strange ability. He could manipulate space and time for a brief moment, bending reality around him. The night was dark, the cold winds howling through the trees. They were resting in a small clearing, trying to regain their strength after another relentless attack by the shadows. Alaron was sitting apart from her, his back straight, his hands resting on his knees. Celine was sharpening her blade when she noticed a subtle shift in the air, a change she couldn't explain. The hairs on the back of her neck stood up. It started slowly at first, a faint ripple in the air around Alaron, like a slight distortion in the space itself. Celine blinked and looked again, but it was gone. She frowned and turned her attention back to him. Then, with no warning, the air around Alaron shimmered, bending, warping, like a heat wave rising off hot asphalt. The air bent and twisted, folding in on itself in unnatural ways, creating a visual distortion that left Celine momentarily breathless. Alaron stood up, his eyes fixed on something in the distance, his expression distant, almost blank. His movements were deliberate, as if each step he took was a careful calculation. The distortion in the air intensified, growing wider, more pronounced. Celine watched in stunned silence as reality around him seemed to bend and twist. The world seemed to warp, like looking through the bottom of a glass bottle, with edges blurring and shifting in unpredictable ways. "Alaron, what are you doing?" Celine asked, her voice barely above a whisper, unsure if she should intervene. He didn't answer immediately, as though he hadn't heard her at all. Instead, he stepped forward, and the ground beneath his feet began to ripple, as if reality itself was buckling under the weight of his power. The shadows around them recoiled, their usual creeping nature, now shifting in a chaotic dance, as if even the darkness was afraid of what was happening. Finally, he turned to her, his face still distant, but now with a trace of something darker in his eyes. "I can feel it, the energy. It's all around us. It's pulling me in." His voice was low, almost reverent, as if he were speaking to something greater than her or even himself. Celine stepped closer, her hand instinctively reaching for her weapon, but she held back. She could feel the change in the air, the power growing stronger, more consuming. "Aileron, stop it!" She called out, her voice rising in urgency. "This is dangerous." But it was too late. Aileron's eyes snapped open wide, and the distortion in the air exploded outward, a wave of energy that sent Celine flying backward, slamming her into the ground with brutal force. Dazed, Celine struggled to her feet, her breath coming in gasps, as she looked up to see Aileron standing amidst a whirlwind of energy, his form almost glowing with an otherworldly light. His body was flickering, shifting between human and something else, something far more ancient and powerful. "Aileron!" Celine shouted, fear creeping into her voice. "What's happening to you?" Aileron's head tilted slightly, and he looked at her with a mix of confusion and something else, something alien in his eyes. I I don't know," he murmured. "It's like I'm becoming something more, something I can't control." Celine's heart skipped a beat. The man she had been traveling with, the man she had trusted, he was becoming something else. And she could see it in the way his body was shifting, becoming more and more inhuman. His face, once handsome, was now beginning to warp, his features, stretching and distorting, as if he were losing himself to the very energy he had sought to control. "Aileron, listen to me," Celine said, her voice shaking with a mixture of fear and desperation. "You have to stop. We need to get away from here before—" But before she could finish, Aileron's body contorted violently, and with a burst of energy, the distortion in the air exploded once more. This time it was no longer just a ripple. It was a violent force that tore through the fabric of reality itself. Celine was thrown back once more, her body slamming into the ground. She groaned, struggling to breathe, as the world around her spun wildly. Through the haze, she saw Aileron's form flicker, his human features fading completely as he became something else entirely. And then, as quickly as it had all started, it was over. The distortion faded, and Aileron collapsed to his knees, his breathing ragged, his eyes wide and filled with confusion. Celine ran to him, her heart pounding in her chest. "Aileron, what happened?" she demanded, her voice urgent, fearful. Aileron looked up at her, his expression utterly lost. I don't know," he whispered. "I can feel it inside me, changing me." Celine's heart sank. Aileron was no longer the man she had first met. He was something else, something more dangerous. The realization hit her hard. Aileron was becoming something she could no longer control. Day by day, Aileron continued to change uncontrollably, and his transformation became more and more evident. He began losing all human emotions, his face growing increasingly colder, his actions more robotic. It was as if the man she had known was slipping away with every passing moment. The first time Celine realized the full extent of Aileron's transformation was after a violent outburst. Aileron had lashed out in a fit of rage, destroying a nearby structure with a single blow. His eyes had been wild, unblinking, and his breath had been labored, like he was no longer in control of his body. "Aileron, stop!" Celine shouted, rushing toward him, her voice laced with panic. "This isn't you. This rage, it's not you." Aileron barely seemed to hear her. His features were contorted in anger, and for a moment he seemed almost unrecognizable. It was as if his entire being had been consumed by the alien power within him, the power that he had absorbed from the artifact. Celine took a step back, a knot forming in her stomach. It was clear that Aileron's humanity was slipping away faster than she had feared. She had to do something, and quickly. She spent the next few days in a state of constant worry, watching Aileron with growing concern. Every time he looked at her, there was something more distant in his gaze, something cold and almost predatory. She knew she couldn't wait much longer. She had to act. One night, while sitting in their camp, Celine absent-mindedly cut her hand on the sharp edge of a piece of metal. The wound was small, but as the blood began to drip onto the ground, something strange happened. As the blood touched the ground, a faint pulse of energy seemed to radiate from it. For a moment, the air around her seemed to shift, vibrating slightly, like the very fabric of reality had been touched by something extraordinary. She had forgotten about the incident until later that evening, when she saw one of the small alien creatures they had encountered earlier, wounded and barely alive, crawl into their camp. Celine instinctively reached out to it, her blood still fresh on her hand. To her surprise, the creature didn't recoil. Instead, it came closer, its wounds healing before her very eyes. Celine's eyes widened. She had seen this before when her blood had accidentally touched the alien creature. During a fight, it had healed in the same way. It was a power she hadn't realized she possessed. Her blood seemed to have a unique ability to heal, to restore, to bring life to those who were near death. She couldn't ignore it anymore. This might be the only chance she had to save Alaron before it was too late. She hesitated for a moment, unsure if this was the right course of action, but then made up her mind. She would do anything to save him. She found Alaron sitting by the fire, his gaze fixed on the flickering flames. His eyes were distant, unfocused. She stepped toward him, holding her breath. "Alaron," she said softly, "I have to try something." Alaron turned to look at her, his expression unreadable. "What do you mean?" he asked, his voice calm but distant. Celine didn't hesitate. She slowly extended her hand, offering him her blood. "I think my blood can help you," she said. "It might be the only way to reverse the changes you're going through." Alaron's gaze softened, a flicker of emotion crossing his face. "Are you sure this will work?" he asked quietly. "I don't know," Celine admitted, "but I have to try." With a mixture of apprehension and hope, she pricked her finger and allowed a drop of blood to fall onto Alaron's chest. As soon as the blood touched him, there was a brief flash of light. The air around them seemed to hum, vibrating, with an energy neither of them could fully understand. Alaron's body tensed, but then something incredible happened. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, the color began to return to his face. His breathing deepened, and his body seemed to relax. For a moment, Celine thought it might not work, but then Alaron's eyes fluttered open. He blinked, looking around in confusion. "What happened?" he asked, his voice clearer, more like the man she had once known. "You're starting to heal," Celine said, her voice filled with relief. "I don't know if it's enough, but it's a start." Alaron blinked again, his expression softening. He looked at Celine with an intensity that she had not seen in him for days, maybe weeks. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice barely audible. Celine didn't answer immediately, her heart pounding in her chest. She knew they had a long road ahead, but for the first time in a long while she felt a spark of hope. Maybe this was the beginning of Alaron's return to the man he once was. However, there was still a lingering fear. Celine had no idea what the long-term effects would be. The artifact, the alien power inside Alaron, it was all connected to the energy in her blood. What would this mean for both of them in the future? Celine didn't have the answers yet, but for now it was enough that Alaron had taken his first step back toward humanity, and that for the moment was all that mattered. Alaron awoke, but this recovery came with a power beyond his control. The energy radiating from him felt almost tangible, like the air around him was charged with an electric force. His body was alive with energy far more potent than it had ever been before. His eyes, though still human, seemed to shimmer with an otherworldly light, as if his very soul was undergoing a transformation. He was not only stronger, but also had the ability to manipulate space and time with greater frequency. The power he wielded was like nothing Celine had ever witnessed. Every movement he made now seemed to distort the air around him, as if he was bending the very fabric of reality itself. While this power could help them fight the shadows, it also came at a great cost. Alaron's humanity was slipping away with each use of his abilities. His connection to the world, to the people around him, was fading. He was becoming something far more powerful, but something entirely alien. Celine saw the drastic change in Alaron. He was no longer the man she had saved, the one she had fought beside. Now he was a powerful superior, being someone unrecognizable. He stood taller, his frame more imposing, and there was a coldness in his demeanor that made her shiver. His face, once warm and familiar, had become a mask of control and detachment. "Alaron, what's happening to you?" Celine asked, her voice trembling with fear. She stepped closer, her hand instinctively reaching out toward him, but she hesitated. She wasn't sure if the man standing before her was even the same person she had known. Alaron didn't respond immediately. His gaze was fixed on the ground, his mind seemingly far away. When he finally spoke, his voice was cold, almost mechanical. "I don't know, Celine. It's like I can feel everything at once. The power of the pull, it's all around me." Celine watched him carefully, her mind racing. She could see the struggle in his eyes, the battle between the man he once was and the entity he was becoming. She had to do something. She couldn't lose him completely. With every use of the artifact's power, Alaron seemed to lose more of himself. The fabric of reality bent more each time he used his abilities, and Celine feared that soon he would no longer be able to distinguish between what was real and what was not. "You have to stop, Alaron," Celine urged, her voice cracking. "You're losing yourself. I can't lose you too." Alaron turned to face her, his expression pained but still distant. "I don't know how to stop," he admitted. "The power, it's too strong, too overwhelming. I can feel it taking over." Celine stepped forward, her heart aching for him. "You're still in there, Alaron," she whispered, her voice full of determination. "You have to fight it. We can find a way to reverse this." Alaron's eyes flickered, a brief moment of recognition in them, but it was gone as quickly as it appeared. "I want to fight it, Celine," he said softly, "but I don't know how anymore." Celine reached out, gently cupping his face in her hands. "I know you do," she said, her voice filled with unwavering resolve. "And we'll figure it out together. I won't let you lose yourself, Alaron. Not like this." Despite his internal turmoil, Alaron seemed to calm slightly at her touch. He closed his eyes for a moment, taking a deep breath. But even as he did, Celine could feel the power inside him, seething, restless, ready to break free at any moment. "I don't want to lose control, Celine," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "But I don't know how much longer I can hold it back." Celine gently stroked his cheek, her heart breaking for him. "You don't have to do it alone, Alaron. I'm here. We'll figure it out together." Despite everything, Alaron's gaze softened for a moment, a flicker of the man she had once known. He nodded slowly, though doubt still lingered in his eyes. For a fleeting moment there was hope that perhaps together they could find a way to control the power and save Alaron from what he was becoming. As Alaron gradually transformed into a superior being, the shadows began to notice the change within him and started attacking more fiercely. Their attacks were no longer sporadic. They were organized, relentless, and much more dangerous. The shadows sensed the power Alaron had gained, and they were determined to stop him before he became a threat to their existence. A brutal battle ensued, and Alaron and Celine found themselves facing unimaginable forces. The battle was fierce, and the world around them seemed to collapse under the weight of the conflict. The ground trembled beneath their feet as Alaron's newfound power clashed with the relentless assault of the shadows. His every movement sent shockwaves through the air, bending the environment around him as though reality itself was struggling to keep up. The shadows were like an unrelenting tide sweeping through the air, attacking with precision and brutality. They moved in synchrony, each one more dangerous than the last, seeking to overwhelm Alaron and Celine. But Alaron was no longer the man he once was. His newfound abilities were nothing short of terrifying. With a snap of his fingers, Alaron caused a massive rift in space, creating a vortex that sucked the shadows into it, crushing them with the sheer force of the gravitational pull. The air crackled with energy as Alaron bent the laws of nature to his will. Each movement he made sent waves of destruction rippling through the battlefield, and the shadows seemed powerless against his force. "This power, it's too much," Celine said, watching in awe and fear as Alaron unleashed wave after wave of energy. She couldn't deny the beauty of what he was capable of, but she also couldn't ignore the terrifying price he was paying for it. "It's the only way to win," Alaron replied, his voice distant, almost mechanical. His eyes glowed with an intensity she had never seen before, and he no longer seemed entirely human. "I can feel it. The power. It's taking over. I don't know how much longer I can hold on." Each time Alaron used the artifact's power, reality seemed to tremble. The more he used it, the more his humanity slipped away. His face became colder, his movements more deliberate, his actions increasingly disconnected from the world around him. Celine could see the man she had known fading, replaced by something else, something she was afraid to confront. "Alaron, stop!" Celine shouted as she ran to him, her voice shaking. "You're going too far. You're not just fighting the shadows anymore. You're destroying everything." Alaron turned to her, his eyes blank and distant. "I have to do this, Celine. The shadows are too strong. This is the only way we can survive. It's the only way I can save you." Celine's heart ached at his words, but she knew that this wasn't the Alaron she had fought beside. He was losing himself, and if she didn't stop him, he would become something worse. She had to find a way to stop the destruction, to bring him back before it was too late. "Alaran, please," she cried, her voice filled with desperation. "You're not just saving us, you're destroying everything we fought for." For a moment it seemed as though something flickered in Alaran's eyes, a flash of recognition, a glimmer of the man he used to be. But then it was gone, replaced by the cold, detached being that was slowly overtaking him. The battle raged on with the air thick with tension and energy. Celine fought alongside Alaran, her strength and determination, keeping them both going. But she knew that their survival was growing more uncertain with every passing moment. As the battle reached its climax, Alaran made a decision. He would use the artifact's power one last time, but this time he would control it. He would harness the energy, not let it consume him. With an act of sheer will, he focused all his strength into the artifact, channeling the power into a single controlled burst. The explosion of energy was blinding, the light flooding the battlefield, incinerating the shadows in its wake. The ground trembled violently as the very earth seemed to be pulled into the rift Alaran had created. When the light faded, the battlefield was eerily silent. The shadows were gone, obliterated by the power Alaran had unleashed. But Alaran stood there breathing heavily, his body trembling. He had succeeded in saving them, but at what cost? Alaran collapsed to his knees, exhausted, his humanity almost completely gone. Celine rushed to his side, kneeling beside him, her heart heavy with the weight of what had happened. "You saved us," she whispered, her voice full of emotion. "But you've lost so much." Alaran looked up at her, his eyes empty, the light within them flickering like a dying star. "I had to. Celine," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "I had to do it for you, for us. But I don't know if I can come back from this." The battle was over, but the true cost of victory had only just begun to sink in. Alaran had saved them, but in doing so he had sacrificed the last remnants of his humanity. Celine watched as Alaran struggled with the overwhelming weight of his power. It was clear that the changes within him were taking their toll both physically and emotionally. His mind was a battleground torn between the duty he felt to protect the universe and the deep growing fear that he was losing the very essence of who he was. The power of the artifact had become an intoxicating force. It surged within him, a living thing constantly demanding more. It whispered promises of unimaginable strength and control, but each time Alaran yielded to it, he felt his humanity slip further away. The more he used the artifact, the less he recognized the man he had once been. Alaran's body was now constantly thrumming with energy, his muscles tight, his senses heightened. His eyes, once warm and filled with emotion, now gleamed with a cold, distant light. He could feel the artifact's presence within him, its power coursing through his veins, and it was terrifying. "Celine, I don't know what to do." Alaran admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. His hands trembled slightly as he ran them through his hair, the weight of the decision crushing him. "The power, it's too much for me to handle." Celine stood before him, her gaze soft but filled with intensity. She saw the battle waging inside him, the war between his duty to protect and the man he was slowly losing. She knew what this moment meant. Alaran was at the brink, and the decision before him could determine whether he would keep his humanity or embrace the power that threatened to consume him. "Alaran," Celine began gently, "you're not alone in this. You don't have to carry this burden by yourself." Her voice wavered with emotion, but she held her ground. "But you have to decide. You can keep using this power, but you know that if you do, you risk losing yourself forever. Or you can let it go and try to find a way back to who you were." Alaran's face was pale, his eyes searching hers as if looking for an answer, a way out. "But what if there's no way back, Celine?" His voice was hoarse, filled with doubt. "What if I've already gone too far?" Celine's heart ached at his words. She stepped closer, her hand gently resting on his shoulder. "There's always a way back, Alaran. You just have to believe it's worth fighting for, and I'll be here with you every step of the way." The weight of her words hung in the air, but Alaran remained silent. He could feel the power within him raging, pushing against his will, urging him to give in. It was easier to embrace the power. It was easier to let go of his humanity and let the strength of the artifact take over. "I don't want to lose myself," Alaran whispered, his voice breaking. He clenched his fists, his body tense. But I can't just stand by and watch everything fall apart either. I know, Celine said softly. She stepped forward, her presence steadying him. But Alaron, you have to remember why you're fighting. Not just for the universe, but for yourself. You can't lose who you are in the process of saving everything else. Alaron's eyes searched hers, filled with uncertainty, but also a flicker of hope. Do you really think I can come back from this? He asked, his voice barely audible. Do you think I can control it? Celine nodded, her gaze firm. I do. I know you, Alaron. I know what you're capable of. You've always had the strength to fight for others. You just have to remember that the greatest strength is in holding on to who you are. Alaron's hands trembled as he reached up, placing them on his chest, feeling the energy that coursed through him. But I can't keep this up forever, he whispered. I can feel it. It's eating away at me. Celine's heart broke for him. She knew the toll this was taking on him, both physically and emotionally. But she couldn't give up. Not now. Alaron, I know it's hard, but you have to choose. You can let the power consume you, or you can fight it and find a way to return to yourself. There was a long silence as Alaron stared at her, his expression torn. He was caught between the power he had embraced and the man he had been. Finally, he spoke, his voice barely audible. I'll try. I don't know if I can, but I'll try. Celine smiled, a faint glimmer of hope in her eyes. That's all we can do. We'll figure it out together. Alaron looked at her, his expression softening, though the uncertainty remained. He nodded slowly. Together, he said. We'll do it together. Together they stood on the edge of an uncertain future. The path ahead was unclear, but one thing was certain. They would face it side by side no matter what. Celine stood over Alaron, her heart heavy with the decision she had made. After everything that had happened, after all the battles and sacrifices, she knew that this was the only way forward. She had to try again. She had to use her blood to save him, to stop him from losing the last remnants of his humanity. The air around them was thick with tension. The ground still trembled from the aftermath of the last battle with the shadows. The dust from the shattered earth hung in the air, and the moonlight illuminated the scene in a haunting, eerie glow. Alaron lay still, his breathing shallow but steady, but his eyes were closed, as if his soul was fighting a war within himself. Celine, though exhausted, knew what she had to do. She couldn't afford to waste any more time. Each passing second was a step closer to Alaron, losing himself forever. She slowly knelt beside him, her fingers trembling slightly as she pricked her finger on a sharp stone. She was used to the sensation, but this time felt different. The weight of her decision pressed on her chest like an anchor, tethering her to the moment. A drop of her blood formed glistening in the moonlight before she carefully placed it over Alaron's chest. She felt the pulse of her own heart in her veins, syncing with the rhythmic beat of the universe around them. Her blood, intertwined with the cosmic energy flowing through Alaron's body, began to hum with power. The moment it touched his skin, an electric shock ran through them, both sending a jolt of energy from her fingertips to the depths of Alaron's body. As the blood seeped into his skin, a strange, powerful force began to move within him. Alaron's body arched, as if responding to an unseen force. His eyes snapped open, glowing brightly, reflecting the vast expanse of energy swirling around them. The power inside him shifted, reacting to Celine's blood, as it mingled with the forces he had been controlling. The air crackled with energy. For a moment, everything seemed to freeze, and Celine felt herself being pulled into Alaron's aura, drawn closer, as if they were becoming one. The sensation was overwhelming. It was as if the universe itself had paused to watch what was happening, and the very fabric of reality bent under the weight of their combined power. Celine gasped as the energy surged through her veins, as though her blood had become a conduit for something far greater than she could ever comprehend. She had intended to heal Alaron, to stop him from slipping away into the abyss, but this felt different. Her blood was doing more than healing. It was merging with his power, amplifying the cosmic force that had taken root in his body. Alaron's body jerked, his breathing quickening. The force inside him was too strong, too wild. Celine's blood was connecting with the cosmic power, amplifying it beyond their control. Alaron gasped, his entire body trembling as the energy swirled through him. His eyes flared, almost glowing, as he fought to keep control. "Celine, stop!" Alaron shouted, his voice a mix of fear and desperation. His hands grasped at the air, trying to pull back from the surge of power that was threatening to consume him. I can't control it. The power, it's too much, Celine gasped, feeling the strain of the blood bond. Her body was starting to weaken. The energy she was giving was draining her faster than she had anticipated. She could feel the life force leaving her, but she couldn't stop now. Alaron needed her. The universe needed them both. Alaron, you have to fight it, Celine cried out, her voice barely a whisper. You have to fight this inside you. Alaron's body convulsed as the energy inside him waged war against his will. I don't know how much longer I can hold on, he gasped. His voice was strained, barely audible. But I won't let go. I won't lose myself. As their combined energies continued to swirl around them, it became clear to both of them that this moment, this fusion of blood and power, was changing more than just their fates. It was altering the very fabric of the universe, bending reality to their will. The world around them seemed to pulse with life. The stars above flickered brighter, as if watching, as if acknowledging the power they had unlocked. Celine, still connected to Alaron through their shared blood, could feel the universe holding its breath. Alaron, with one last surge of energy, broke the cycle. The connection shattered and both of them collapsed to the ground. Celine's blood had done its job, but at a price. We did it! Alaron whispered, his voice full of awe and relief. I'm still here. I feel like myself again. Celine smiled weakly, her strength nearly gone. We saved you, Alaron, she murmured, her voice soft. We saved the universe. As they lay there, both of them drained but alive, they realized that the journey ahead would not be easy. But together they had proven that they could defy the odds, challenge fate, and change the universe. The final battle had reached its peak, and the stakes had never been higher. The air around them seemed to hum with an energy so raw, so powerful, that it almost felt like the world itself was holding its breath. The shadows were relentless, their numbers seemingly infinite, pouring from every crack in the earth, from the folds of reality itself. They were everywhere. They had become the very essence of darkness and destruction. Alaron, standing at the heart of the storm, felt the full force of the artifact pulsing through him. The power inside him was now a part of his very being, a living, breathing entity that he could no longer escape. But instead of resisting, Alaron let go. He let the artifact's energy flood him completely, embracing it as a warrior would embrace their final battle. This was the moment. The shadows around him seemed to recoil, as if sensing the overwhelming power building within him. With a single movement, Alaron thrust his arms forward, and the power of the artifact exploded from him. It was not a mere burst of energy. It was a force of nature. The ground cracked open, and the air itself bent under the pressure of the unleashed power. A wave of light, pure and devastating, erupted from his body and swept across the battlefield. The shadows were caught in the blast, their forms disintegrating into nothingness, as the wave of cosmic energy consumed them. Their cries echoed across the battlefield, a sound of pure terror and desperation, as the energy tore through them. Their bodies twisted and writhed in pain, but they were powerless against the force of Alaron's attack. Alaron's hands crackled with light as he pushed the power even further. The energy radiated outward in a wave, bending reality itself. The shadows, though numerous, could not withstand the force he unleashed. As he focused the power into a concentrated beam, the light became a lance of destruction, piercing through the heart of every shadow in its path. No more running, Alaron muttered under his breath, his voice barely audible over the roar of the battle. His body was shaking with the exertion, his energy reserves nearly depleted, but he couldn't stop now. The artifact had become an extension of his very being, and he was no longer just a man. He was a force of nature, an unstoppable storm. His body became a beacon of light, each pulse of energy forcing the shadows back. The ground trembled under the force of his power, and the atmosphere itself seemed to distort as the balance of the universe was momentarily shifted. The very air crackled with raw, untamed energy, and the shadows, once so confident in their endless numbers, began to falter. It's over, Celine whispered to herself as she watched the destruction unfold. Her heart ached for Alaron. She could see the toll this was taking on him. He was pushing himself beyond his limits, sacrificing parts of himself with every attack. But she knew he wouldn't stop. Not now. With one final earth-shattering roar, Alaron released the last of his power. The blast shot across the battlefield, enveloping the shadows in pure light. The explosion was deafening, and for a moment everything went silent. When the light faded, nothing remained of the shadows but a faint dark mist dissipating into the air. The battlefield lay in ruins, and Alaron collapsed to the ground, his breath ragged, his body shaking violently from the exertion. Celine rushed to his side, her heart pounding in her chest. Alaron, please stay with me. We did it. Alaron murmured weakly, his voice barely above a whisper. His body was spent, drained of everything he had given. But there was a look of peace on his face, as though despite the cost he had found some measure of redemption. Celine knelt beside him, her own breath shaky. She gently touched his face, feeling the coolness of his skin. You've saved us all, Alaron, she whispered, her voice trembling. But I don't know if you can ever come back from this. Alaron's eyes were distant, his gaze lost in the vastness of space and time. I've given everything I could, Celine, he whispered. Everything I am. But I did it for you, for all of us. And as the universe began to heal, the cost of the victory hung heavy in the air. Alaron had given up more than anyone could imagine. The shadows were no more. But at what cost? Celine sat beside him, her gaze steady on the stars above. They had won, but they had lost a part of themselves along the way. The universe had changed, and so had they. The universe had been saved. The shadows had been vanquished, their darkness scattered to the wind. But the cost of that victory hung heavy in the air, a burden neither Alaron nor Celine could escape. Alaron stood by the edge of the battlefield, his eyes staring out at the horizon. The land was quiet now, but the silence felt oppressive, as though the universe itself was holding its breath, waiting for something more. He could feel it deep within him, an unsettling sense that their victory was but a temporary pause in an ongoing war. Celine, Alaron began, his voice distant, almost lost in the vastness of the still world around them. The shadows are gone, but we both know that the darkness isn't finished. There are always more enemies in the shadows, always more waiting for their turn. Celine joined him, standing quietly by his side. She had seen the toll the battle had taken on him, on both of them. Alaron's body had been pushed to the brink, his humanity stripped away in moments of power that were far beyond anything a normal person could endure. But the change was more than physical. It was something deeper. Alaron had been transformed. The artifact had fused with his body on a level beyond comprehension, and though it had saved the universe, it had left him altered irrevocably. His skin, once human, now shimmered faintly with an ethereal glow. His eyes, though still recognizable, held a depth that was unnerving, as though they could see into the very fabric of the universe. His hands, when they moved, left behind traces of energy, a silent reminder of the power he now carried. Alaron, you've changed, Celine said softly, her voice tinged with sorrow. You saved the universe, but you didn't come out of it unscathed. What has happened to you? What has the artifact done to you? Alaron's gaze met hers, and for a moment there was a flicker of vulnerability in his eyes. I'm not the man I was, Celine. I know that, but I'm still me, at least I think I am. The artifact has given me power, but it has taken so much more in return. My humanity, it's slipping away, and I don't know if I can get it back. Celine stepped closer to him, her eyes filled with compassion. You may not be the same as before, Alaron, but you're still the person I fought beside, the person who has always been willing to sacrifice everything for others. She placed a hand gently on his arm, grounding him. You're not alone. You never were. Alaron's lips twitched slightly, the faintest hint of a smile forming. I don't know what to do now, Celine. The universe is saved, but at what cost? I can't go back to the way things were. I can't go back to who I was. She nodded, understanding the depth of his struggle. I know, but even if you can't go back, you can still move forward. You've done things no one else could, and together we'll find a way to help you rebuild yourself, your humanity, your strength, your soul. Alaron took a deep breath, closing his eyes. For a moment he allowed himself to simply be, no power, no artifact, no battles. Just him. But the world around him was still changing, and so was he. The power had left its mark on him physically and mentally, but even so there was still a part of him deep down that was still the man who fought for the universe, who sacrificed everything. I think, Alaran finally said, his voice steadier now, that the hardest part isn't the power or even the battle. It's living with the consequences of what we've done. The universe is free, but will never be the same. Celine gave him a small smile, a rare moment of peace in the midst of their struggle. Maybe not, she said softly, but we're here, and we're still fighting. The silence between them was comfortable for once as they stood side by side. The battle was over, but the war was not. They had won a crucial victory, but now they had to live with the aftermath. The world and they themselves had been changed forever. Alaran looked up at the stars, his eyes once again filled with purpose. We'll rebuild, he said, his voice steady. The universe may never forget what we did, but it's up to us to keep it safe. And whatever happens, we'll face it together. And as they stood together under the vastness of the universe, they knew that their journey was far from over. The shadows might be gone, but new challenges awaited them, and they would face them side by side just as they had always done. The weight of Alaran's decision hung heavily in the air. He had always been a warrior, one who had fought and sacrificed to protect the universe, but now for the first time he was choosing to give it all up. The very essence of what made him strong, the power of the artifact, had to be abandoned. The universe had been saved, but Alaran knew deep down that he could not continue to bear the price of that power. Standing at the edge of the quiet battlefield, Alaran gazed into the stars, a deep sense of sorrow mixed with relief. The battle had been won, but he had changed. No longer the man who first walked into the chaos, now he was a product of the artifact's power, a force of nature that felt more alien than human. He knew he couldn't live like this anymore. I can't keep this, Alaran spoke quietly to Celine, his voice tinged with exhaustion and resolve. This power, it's too much. It's changed me, and it's taken too much from me. I've given up too much of myself. Hanai. Celine's eyes softened, but her expression was resolute. She had known this moment would come. She had seen the toll that the power had taken on Alaran, the way it had consumed him, how it had worn away at his very soul. Despite his physical strength, Alaran was not invulnerable to the price of the artifact. You don't have to do this alone, Celine said, stepping closer to him. I'll be by your side through whatever comes next. But if you're truly sure, then I'll help you. Alaran nodded slowly. I've fought with this power for so long, I don't know what it will be like to live without it. But I'm willing to try. I have to try. The ritual to sever the bond with the artifact was ancient, its origins lost to time. Celine knew it would be no simple act. The connection between Alaran and the artifact was not just a physical one. It was woven into his very being, embedded deep within his soul. To break it would be like tearing a part of himself away. We need to perform the ritual in the temple, Celine explained. It's the only place where the bond can be safely severed. But you must be ready. This will be painful, and it might change you in ways you cannot predict. Alaran's jaw tightened, but he was resolute. I'm ready, he said. Let's do it. It's time to let go. The journey to the temple was silent, save for the sound of their footsteps as they moved through the dense ancient forest. As they neared the temple, the air seemed to grow heavier, charged with an unseen energy. The temple, long abandoned, stood before them like a monument to forgotten times. It was here that the ritual would take place, here that Alaran would sever his connection to the power that had shaped him into something unrecognizable. Inside the temple, Celine lit the ancient candles, their flames flickering weakly in the dim light. She stood beside Alaran as he sat at the center of the sacred space, preparing himself for what was to come. The air seemed to pulse with energy, as if the temple itself was alive, reacting to the immense power about to be unleashed. Alaran closed his eyes, his hands resting on his knees, and began to focus. He could feel the energy of the artifact inside him, like a fire burning deep within his chest. It was the very thing that had given him strength, but now it felt like a poison, a part of him he had to expel. With every breath he concentrated on letting go, on releasing the artifact's hold on him. The ritual was long, each moment stretching into an eternity. Alaran felt his body tremble as the energy surged through him, trying to resist, trying to fight back. The artifact didn't want to let go. It was part of him, and it clung desperately to its host. But Alaran's resolve was stronger. Slowly, piece by piece, the connection between him and the artifact began to unravel. Finally, with a final painful exhale, Alaron felt the last of the power slip away. His body went still, and the oppressive weight that had been hanging over him for so long lifted. He felt a deep emptiness, but also a freedom he had never known. He opened his eyes and looked at Celine, who had been by his side through the entire process. Her face was filled with relief and sadness, but also pride. "It's done," Alaron whispered, his voice hoarse but free. "I'm free." Celine knelt beside him, her hand gently resting on his. "You did it, Alaron. You've given up the greatest power in the universe, and now we'll face the future together without it." Together, Alaron agreed, his heart light for the first time in a long while. Whatever happens next, we'll face it side by side. The universe had been saved, but now Alaron and Celine would face an entirely new journey, one that did not depend on the power of the artifact. Together, they would forge a new path free from the chains of power that had once bound them. After abandoning the artifact, Alaron began to see the universe through a new lens. The power he had once held in his grasp was gone, but in its place was something far more valuable: understanding. He understood that the universe was not defined by power alone, but by the core values that tied all beings together: love, sacrifice, and the capacity to understand one another. As they walked side by side, traveling across the now peaceful world, they realized that the war they had won wasn't just against the shadows, but against a way of thinking that had plagued civilizations for eons. The idea that power alone could shape destiny was shattered. Now it was about cooperation, understanding, and the willingness to sacrifice for the greater good. Alaron looked at Celine, his voice soft but full of conviction. "I never imagined that strength could be measured by something other than power. But what we've built together, what we've learned, that's the real strength of the universe." Celine smiled, her hand brushing his lightly. "Sometimes the hardest battles aren't fought with weapons, but with the heart, and that's what makes us stronger." The civilizations of the universe began to take notice of the change that had occurred. They saw the story of Alaron and Celine as a beacon of hope, a symbol of what could be achieved when beings, regardless of their origins, united for a common purpose. The true strength of the universe was not in the weapons that could be wielded, but in the bonds that could be formed. "We've shown them that it's not just the power that can change things," Celine said, her voice filled with awe. "It's the way we choose to use it, how we choose to act together." Alaron nodded, looking ahead. "The universe is vast, Celine, and full of possibilities, but it's also fragile. It's up to us to protect it, to guide it towards peace and unity." Alaron and Celine became legends, their names etched into the fabric of the universe. They were more than just protectors. They were pioneers of a new way of thinking, a new way of existing in the universe. Their bond became the symbol of the unity that was now possible among the stars. Celine looked at Alaron, the two of them standing in the quiet aftermath of the battle. "Do you ever wonder what the future holds for us?" she asked, her voice filled with curiosity and a hint of uncertainty. Alaron smiled, but it was soft and thoughtful. "I've stopped wondering, Celine. I think we'll write our future together. Whatever happens, whatever comes our way, we face it together." Their connection had evolved into something unbreakable. They had fought side by side, suffered together, and shared moments of triumph and loss. It had bound them in ways that no power, no force in the universe could ever tear apart. They had become more than companions. They were partners, equals, and in a sense, soulmates. "I know you, Alaron," Celine whispered one night as they sat together on the balcony, overlooking the vast expanse of space. "No matter what happens, no matter what you become, you'll always be the man who fought for this universe for us." Alaron smiled, but there was a sadness in his eyes. "I'm not the same as I was, Celine," he replied quietly. "But I don't need to be. What matters is that I'm here with you, and that we can still face the future together." "Together," Celine said firmly, taking his hand in hers. "And no matter what, we'll face it side by side. Always." Their connection had deepened beyond what words could express. In the time they had spent together, fighting side by side through every battle, they had come to understand each other in ways that went beyond the physical or even emotional. Their connection was something deeper, forged in the fires of adversity. It was a bond of shared purpose, of mutual respect, and of love. Together they faced the future, knowing that while the battles they had fought had ended, their journey was far from over. The universe, vast and full of uncertainty, still had many tests ahead. But with each other, they felt ready to face whatever challenges might come their way. The universe had begun to heal. After the devastating battles, the countless losses, and the immense sacrifices, a new sense of peace was finally emerging from the chaos. It was a fragile peace, one built on the ashes of destruction, but it was peace nonetheless. Selene and Alaron, having played pivotal roles in the war's end, now found themselves at the forefront of the rebuilding effort. "We've done it, Alaron," Selene said, her voice soft, almost reverent, as she gazed out over the stars. "The universe is healing piece by piece. We've given them a chance at peace." Alaron stood beside her, his gaze fixed on the endless expanse before them. "Yes, but it's still fragile, Selene. The peace we fought for can easily slip away if we're not vigilant." "You're right," she replied, nodding slowly. "The universe has always been full of chaos, but now we have to ensure that it doesn't fall back into the same patterns of destruction." Their names had become synonymous with hope, sacrifice, and change. Across the galaxy, civilizations began to tell their story, how they had stood against the shadows of destruction, how they had fought not just for survival, but for a vision of a better future. It was a story that inspired millions, a beacon for those who had lost hope in the darkness. "This is just the beginning," Alaron said, his voice steady, but with a hint of uncertainty. "We've paved the way, but now the real work begins. We have to teach the universe that it's not just about fighting, it's about understanding. And cooperation," Selene added, turning to face him. "You're not alone in this, Alaron. We'll do it together. We'll teach them that unity is the true power, not destruction." Alaron smiled faintly, the weight of their shared journey evident in his eyes. "Together," he said softly, "always." Alaron had changed in ways he never imagined. No longer the warrior defined by the artifact, he had become someone who lived in harmony with his own humanity. The power that had once consumed him, that had shaped him into a being far beyond human, was now gone. But the transformation didn't just stop with his loss of the artifact's power. He had become more compassionate, more attuned to the struggles of others. The time he spent with Selene, working side by side to rebuild the universe, had opened his eyes to the depth of what it meant to be human. "I see things differently now," Alaron murmured, his hand brushing against Selene's. "Before I only saw power, now I see people. I see the strength and unity in standing together." Selene smiled, squeezing his hand. "You've always had that strength, Alaron. You just had to see it for yourself." Selene too had grown, but in her own way. Though she was still the fierce warrior who had once fought alongside Alaron, she had found a new sense of purpose. Her journey alongside him had taught her the importance of empathy and the strength found in unity. Where she had once been driven solely by the desire for victory, now she sought understanding and cooperation above all else. She had become a leader in a way that transcended her combat skills. Her strength now lay in her ability to connect with others, to lead through compassion and vision. "I used to think winning was everything," Selene said, looking into Alaron's eyes. "Now I know that peace, understanding, and working together are what really matter." "You've always known what mattered, Selene," Alaron said with a smile, his voice warm. "You've always been a fighter for what's right. I just needed to see it myself." Together they had become more than just partners. They had become the embodiment of a new era, one where unity and understanding reigned supreme. They had learned that even in the darkest times, the human spirit had the capacity to rebuild, to rise again. And it wasn't just their victory that defined them. It was their willingness to face the future with open hearts, ready to adapt, to learn, and to evolve. "I think the hardest part isn't over," Selene said, her voice quiet yet filled with resolve. "The battles we fought may be finished, but the real challenge is in rebuilding the trust, the unity we need. We've changed the course of the future, but we must continue to guide it." Alaron placed a hand on her shoulder, looking up at the stars with a quiet determination. "We will, Selene. We've already made a difference, and together we'll keep making sure this peace holds for all of us." The universe was slowly rebuilding, but not without new challenges. As civilizations began to recover from the aftermath of war, they were faced with new dilemmas: how to foster lasting peace in a universe that had known only conflict for so long. Selene and Alaron knew that their role wasn't over. The peace they had fought for was fragile, and they would need to guide the next generation of leaders to ensure that the galaxy would not fall back into the chaos it had known. "We've only just begun," Alaron said one evening, standing beside Selene as they looked up at the stars. His voice was filled with determination, tempered by the quiet confidence that came from everything they had been through. "This universe will grow and change, but with our strength, we will guide it toward the future we've always believed in." Selene smiled, looking at the stars that once felt so distant, but now seem so close. "And we'll do it together. Whatever comes next, we'll face it side by side." Together they faced the future, knowing that while the battles they had fought had ended, their journey was far from over. The universe, vast and full of uncertainty, still had many tests ahead. But with each other, they felt ready to face whatever challenges might come their way. Despite the ongoing challenges the universe faced, despite the ever-changing landscape of stars and civilizations, one constant remained: the love between Selene and Alaron. It was their guiding light, their unshakable foundation in the face of uncertainty. After all the battles, after the sacrifices, they had found something even more precious. Their lives had settled into a rhythm of peace and purpose, a stark contrast to the chaos they had once known. Together, they had learned to appreciate the quiet moments, the ones that didn't require fighting or sacrifice. Sitting side by side, watching the stars flicker in the vast, peaceful sky, they knew they had earned this peace. "We've come so far," Selene said softly, her voice filled with a quiet joy. "There were times I thought we would never make it through. But now, look at us. We've made it." Alaron looked at her, his eyes soft but a fierce warmth still burning beneath the surface. "We're stronger than we ever knew, Selene. And what we've built here, what we built together, is the true victory." Their love had been tested in the fires of war, and it had emerged stronger, deeper. Each battle they had fought, each sacrifice they had made, had woven their lives together in a bond that was unbreakable. They no longer fought just for survival, but for the promise of a future they could build together. "Do you ever miss the old days?" Selene asked one evening, as they sat watching the planets in the distance, the soft glow of the stars illuminating their faces. "The days when everything was so uncertain." Alaron thought for a moment, then shook his head. "No, I don't miss the uncertainty, but I miss the fight, the purpose it gave me. Now I find purpose in the quiet, in the moments like this when we can just be together." "I feel the same," Selene replied, her smile soft but genuine. "Sometimes the quiet is the hardest thing to get used to after all the noise." Tomorrow, they both sat in silence for a moment, content to be in each other's company, the universe sprawling out in its vastness around them. It was a peace they had earned not through victory alone, but through their willingness to face every challenge together, to rise after every fall. "The future is still uncertain, isn't it?" Alaron said quietly, breaking the silence. "We've faced so much already, and yet it feels like the journey is just beginning." "That's the beauty of it," Selene replied, her voice steady with confidence. "The journey never ends. It's not about the destination, it's about what we choose to do along the way. And I know with you, I'm ready for whatever comes next." Alaron turned to her, his eyes filled with a depth of emotion. "Together always. We'll face everything that comes, hand in hand, side by side." And so, with the stars watching over them, they knew that no matter what lay ahead, they would face it together. For the love they shared, the bond they had forged in the fire of adversity, would always guide them forward. The universe was vast, dark, and full of unknowns. But Selene and Alaron, united by love and purpose, knew that no matter how long the road, no matter how many challenges awaited them, they would face it together. "We fight for more than the universe, Alaron," Selene said, her voice resolute. "We fight for each other, and for the hope that someday peace will last." Alaron nodded, his heart filled with love for the woman beside him. "And for the future, Selene, the future we will build together." They stood together, ready for whatever came, knowing that their love and hope would light the way, no matter how dark the path ahead. The story of Alaron and Selene would be passed down through the generations, becoming a legend that would echo throughout the universe. They were no longer just warriors, but symbols of something much greater: sacrifice and love. Their journey was not just about fighting battles, but about understanding the cost of peace and the strength found in unity. The universe, once defined by endless war and destruction, was now a place where civilizations could collaborate and learn from one another. The hard-won peace that Alaron and Selene had fought for had become a beacon of hope for all who lived among the stars. It wasn't just the end of a conflict, it was the beginning of a new era. Selene and Alaron were not only protectors, they were icons of change embodying the hope that even the most broken worlds could be healed. They were the living proof that love and sacrifice could rebuild a shattered universe, and their legacy would inspire those who followed them for eons to come. As they looked back on their journey, Alaron and Selene understood that every sacrifice had its reason, and every battle had a price. Their love had been the guiding light that kept them going, but it had also been the source of their greatest strength. They had paid the price, and in doing so had changed the course of history. "We've done what we could," Selene whispered one quiet evening as they stood on a hill overlooking the vast cosmos. "But the universe is still growing, still changing. Our story isn't the end, it's the beginning for others to carry on." Alaron turned to her, his eyes reflecting the starlight. "Yes, the journey never ends. It's up to them now, the next generation. But we've shown them the way. We've shown them the power of love," Selene said softly, her hand gently resting in his. "And the strength that comes from sacrifice, from unity. We've built something better," Alaron said, a quiet smile on his lips. "Not just a future, but a new way of living. A future where hope can grow." Their legacy was not just in the victories they had won, but in the changes they had inspired. They had shown the universe that no matter how dark the time, no matter how dire the situation, love and sacrifice would always be the greatest forces in the cosmos. As they continued their journey knowing that they had secured a future for the universe, they also knew their own path was still far from over. Their story, while grand, was but one of many stories in the vastness of existence. And as long as there was life in the stars, their love would remain a guiding force for generations to come. "No matter what happens, Selene," Alaron said, his voice filled with certainty, "our story will be remembered. Our love will be the light that guides the way." Selene looked at him with a smile, the stars reflecting in her eyes. "Yes, Alaron, and no matter where the future takes us, we'll always have each other. Forever." Together they continued their journey knowing that the universe was vast and full of challenges, but with love, sacrifice, and hope they could face anything that lay ahead. As the stars continued to shine in the vast expanse of the universe, Selene and Alaron knew their journey had not been in vain. The battles fought, the sacrifices made, and the love shared had all come together to form the foundation of something greater than themselves, a legacy that would live on for eons to come. Their story would not fade into the silence of space, but would be remembered by all who looked to the heavens for hope. The universe, once torn by conflict and despair, was beginning to flourish. Where once there had been war, now there was the promise of peace. Civilizations that had once fought for dominance now worked together, united by the example set by two warriors who had found strength not just in battle but in each other. Alaron and Selene had become symbols of hope, their love a beacon that guided others towards a brighter future. But their journey wasn't over. The road ahead remained uncertain, and new challenges would undoubtedly arise. Yet for the first time, they didn't face it with fear. With each other, they knew they could overcome anything. The universe was vast and full of mysteries, but together they had already proven that love, sacrifice, and unity were the greatest forces in existence. Their love would continue to burn brightly, an eternal flame that would guide the way for all those who followed. And so as they walked hand in hand into the future, they knew that no matter what the universe held in store, they would face it together, forever united by their love, their sacrifice, and their hope. The story of Alaron and Selene would never end. It would be carried on in every act of love and every battle fought for the greater good.